everyone. My name is Krista, and I'm a sales engineer here at Abnormal AI, and I'm looking forward to walking you through a demo of our platform here today. So at Abnormal, we are taking an intentionally different approach to email security, integrating through native platform APIs to ingest data from your email environment to then behaviorally baseline the behavior for your users, right? We understand what's typical and expected for the users in your environment to understand typical communication patterns and look for any deviation from that norm. This is what allows us to stay ahead of the attack curve and build a proactive, automated approach around email security rather than relying on your team to maintain static policies and rules for your email security posture, right? So with that quick API integration that I just showed you here, we install into your email tenant and start to analyze that data and build that behavioral baseline. It's a very quick time to value. Within 7 days, we can give you access to your environment with those initial findings in terms of what attacks we have detected within your environment. Nothing else is needed from your team for us to get going. So now if I switch over to the Abnormal platform here, the dashboard will show you some on-demand reporting and metrics on what we've found in your environment so far. So up at the top, you can see just under 5,000 attacks stopped in this environment over the last 30 days. And if I scroll down, you'll see the trending attacks breakdown in terms of what attack vectors bad actors are leveraging to try to gain that foothold into your environment. So you'll see it's the full spectrum of email attack vectors that Abnormal can protect against. Credential phishing being, I would say, the most common attack vector that I see in customer environments. But you'll see it ranges from plain text, social engineering attempts, VIP impersonation, payroll fraud, as well as I would say the more sophisticated attempts of vendor impersonation or vendor compromise, trying to complete invoice or payment fraud here. Because of where we sit as an API, we can also have visibility into internal to internal attacks that are happening laterally within your environment and look to remediate those as well. So now if I click into the threat log, here's where you'll see the detections from Abnormal, and you can dive into further detail here. So you can filter down into a specific attack or attack type of interest and review these both at a high level as well as click into be more details. And one important piece I want you to understand from the Abnormal platform here today is our focus on automation, right? So here you see the statuses listed for these events automatically remediated from Abnormal. Again, all that's required from your team is that initial API integration that takes just a few clicks. So if I click into this first attack example, what we see is that it's a Gmail sending address used to impersonate our Chief Financial Officer, Jonathan Green, reaching out to Josh Waters, our Senior Director of Accounting at our organization enterprise. And it's a plain text email asking for a simple request, right? So in this case, rerouting checks for this supposed vendor, Prolia Systems, looking to send that elsewhere for that bad actor. But again, using the identity of Jonathan Green to add legitimacy to this request. We see attempts like this get through native email platforms and traditional email security platforms because of the lack of known bad indicators, right? It's sent from a Gmail account. It's going to pass sender authentication as you see here. And if I scroll back up, you'll see that there's no links or attachments in terms of threat intelligence lookups that can be used to condemn this message, right? Plain text email, Gmail account, very common for what we see in both VIP impersonation as well as the wider employee impersonation through things like payroll fraud attempts. Now, again, this is something Abnormal automatically detects without needing a single rule or policy to be configured by your team. So let's talk about this behavioral baseline and behavioral profiling that I keep mentioning. So here under Analysis Overview, you can see the reasons why Abnormal detected this message as an attack. Up top, we're baselining behavior for each and every one of your users, right? So here we're saying We've seen Jonathan Green send quite a few emails, but we've never seen him send a single one from this Gmail address, right? Beyond that, it's atypical contact for Josh and Jonathan to be communicating. They've never corresponded over email before. And now finally, we understand that it's an urgent financial request. And that's through using natural language processing and natural language understanding. So if I scroll down and click on text analysis, you'll see that we're pulling out the topic, tone, intent of these emails and then correlating that and putting it into context of the other signals that we're seeing and basically making a calculation. Here you'll see that there's tens of thousands of signals that we're looking at, even for this very simple plain text email, to understand, does it match that typical baseline we have for your environment? And if not, is it indicative of a social engineering attack in this case? Which you see Abnormal absolutely detects with high confidence, high efficacy that this is a social engineering attempt. And this is something we would look to auto-remediate in a production environment before your users could see or interact with that email. I'll click back into the threat log and jump into another example here. This time going into a credential phishing attack. So as I mentioned, this is the number one attack vector I see in virtually every environment I've worked in so far during my time at Abnormal, trying to get that user's password and perform actions on their behalf. So again, I'll scroll down to this email content. What we'll see is that it's coming from a seemingly legitimate domain, Elmo Financial, from a Catherine D. Smith there, this time reaching out to our Chief Financial Officer, Jonathan Green, saying he's been sent a document for review. Probably typical for our CFO to be reviewing financial documents, right? So here you see there's DocuSign branding leverage with a QR code to go ahead and scan this QR code to review the document titled Executive Settlement Agreement. A lot of the times I see these things titled like payroll update, 2025 bonus, anything they can do to get that user excited to engage with that email. And in this case, pick up their phone and scan that QR code. Now, not all solutions will look at this email in the same light, right? Not all solutions will be able to analyze that attachment, understand the presence of a QR code, and analyze where that QR code indeed points, which is exactly what Abnormal is doing here. Even if another solution were to be completing those steps, in this case, we see the link point to adobe.com. That's a legitimate platform that's being abused in this case to host malicious content, right? That's very common in credential phishing attacks today. And what we see get through other solutions is because of the lack of threat intelligence available, right? So adobe.com, Microsoft SharePoint, Google Drive, the list goes on in those legitimate platforms getting abused again for these credential phishing attacks. So we talked about the legitimate sender domain, the legitimate link obfuscated through that QR code here. Now let's talk about how that behavioral approach from Abnormal AI automatically identified this email as a threat. So if I scroll back up to the top, we talked about the pieces of this email, and what you'll see is that Abnormal is looking at this from a behavioral perspective and putting those pieces into context, right? So here we're saying unusual sender to be communicating with your organization. Sure. There's no one single deterministic signal within the platform, right? So that's not necessarily enough for us to condemn a message. Of course, we'll see relationship patterns, change over time. It's that baseline is consistently updating in terms of your environment. But here you see that there's a link detected in the attachment. Remember that QR code. And we're calling that link suspicious because it contains an email address, which is very common in credential theft attacks. So if I scroll back down, here you'll see that jonathangreen@enterprise.com is automatically entered at the end of the URL. That way, if Jonathan Green navigates to this site, his username is populated. All he has to do is put in that password to fall for this credential phishing attack, right? So seemingly benign detail of this URL that Abnormal is able to look at from the behavioral perspective and say that's an indicator of a credential phishing attack. So if I scroll back up, again, something we would auto-remediate in production and protect your users from. Now, I want to shift a little bit away from that inbound email security piece and talk about the other pieces of the platform that will really tie your email security posture together. So, the next piece being account takeover. Our goal is to make sure that credential phishing attacks, like I just covered, aren't getting through to your users, but no solution's perfect. Users can get compromised elsewhere. You want to provide that layered approach in protecting your users with account takeover. So we'll apply that same philosophy that you'll see with inbound email security to your users' accounts, right? Understand what's normal and expected and identify any deviation from that norm. So here you'll see I'll click into this account takeover case for Renee West. On the right-hand side, we'll build the employee genome or baseline for that user. Where do they typically log in from? San Francisco, California. Maybe we have another office in New York and Seattle, right? IP addresses, browsers, operating systems, and common cloud apps that Renee uses, right? On the left-hand side, we can then see when unusual behavior arises and build an account takeover timeline for your team to review. So logging in from this unusual browser from an unusual location, Hong Kong, right? Not only is that atypical for Renee, but it's also a case of impossible travel based on previous sign-ins. So at this point, we create the account takeover case and can kick off auto remediation actions. Not only are we looking at sign-in events from that native email platform, either Microsoft or Google Workspace, but we're also looking for the presence of unsafe mail filter rules, right? Trying to hide communication from that true end user that the bad actor may be engaging with. So think delete all mail filter rules, very specific financial language that they're filtering out, etc. Those are behavioral indicators to Abnormal that the account has been compromised. And then finally, lateral messaging, right? So sudden bursts and emails sent. Once we identify that an account has likely been compromised, we'll start to monitor that traffic and messages coming from that account. And we can look to remediate those lateral messages just as we would an inbound malicious attack. So in terms of the auto remediation capabilities with account takeover, I'll just click into this other case, and here you'll see those actions that Abnormal can automatically take. That way we are containing the attack because, of course, members of your team are not always hands-on keyboard able to remediate these accounts, right? Once you get that notification or indicator from your systems. So that's why Abnormal offers this automated remediation here. So that's account takeover here. Again, understanding what do we expect from your users and flagging any indicators that they have likely been compromised, building this case timeline for your team and allowing you to acknowledge these so that, between the team, you all can manage the account takeovers together. One of the last pieces of the platform I'd like to touch on is AI Security Mailbox. This tends to be a favorite feature for email teams because of the time we give you back. So with AI Security Mailbox, what we're looking to do is integrate into however users report emails. If they click on that button, if they forward the email, I'm sure it's a mix of strategies within your environment. But we look to integrate there and ingest all reported emails. And for each of those reported emails, we'll analyze it further and render a judgment. So 100% of reported emails get a judgment. The 4 options are safe, spam, malicious, or phishing simulation. So of course, if it's a phishing simulation, we want to give the user their kudos, their well-deserved kudos. But what you'll see here is that for anything malicious, we'll run that incident response to not only remediate it for the reporter of that email, but find it in any other mailboxes within your environment and remediate all of those together, again, automating that incident response. The last thing we'll do with AI Security Mailbox is respond back to the reporter of the email, indicating the result of the judgment. So let's say, hey, Jonathan Green, that email was found to be safe. Thank you for being vigilant within your mailbox, right? It's completely customizable by your team. I'm sure you can come up with much better messaging than I can off the cuff there. But what we really want to do is provide that timely feedback and close that loop with the end user. That way they feel encouraged to report emails moving forward in your environment. Now, I mentioned the time savings. If we consider with Abnormal on the inbound email security side, the majority of emails that are reported are ultimately going to be found to be safe or spam, right? So that's not very impactful time for your team to be spending manually reviewing and triaging these reported events. That's why we're looking to automate this process. Again, give time back to your team that you can then spend on more impactful projects here. Awesome. So that takes me through the major pieces of the platform that I wanted to cover today here in the demo. There's absolutely more to uncover in terms of abnormal security that I'd be happy to talk you through at a later date. So please reach out if any of the topics we discussed sparked interest. Would be more than happy to perform a deeper dive. But thank you so much for the time. Thank you for attending Abnormal Innovate, and I hope to talk soon.